So you have been thinking of moving to Guelph, Ontario, and you're wondering what are some of the good and the bad, the pros and the cons of living in Guelph, Ontario? Well, you do want to stick around because that's what this video is about. We're going to dive right into both sides, the good and the bad side of living in Guelph, Ontario, to help you make a decision whether or not this is the right town for you. So stay tuned as we get right into it. Hello and welcome. If this is your first time to this channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo, Guelph and surrounding towns, then do subscribe below and tap on that bell for notification so you can be the first to learn about the current market in Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo, Guelph and surrounding towns. My name is Dixit. I'm a local real estate agent serving Kitchener and surrounding areas. I do get calls, text, email from people just like you pretty much every single day who are looking for help in making their move in and around Kitchener, and I absolutely love it. Whether you're thinking of moving in 9 days or 90 days, be sure to reach out, give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email, or you can even schedule a Zoom call. All the info right in the description below. I'll be more than happy to help you make a smooth move in and around Kitchener, Ontario. Now, one of the things that residents in Guelph enjoy is the central location this city has. And if you think about it, if you were to look it up in Google Maps, Guelph is kind of that sweet spot where you're not too far away from Greater Toronto area, and on further west you have Waterloo region, which is another 30-35 minute commute if you were to head further west from Highway 6, then down to 401 west and then to Highway 8. Now, on the other side, you're looking at about 45 to 60 minute drive at the most to get you to the Toronto downtown, depending on what part of Guelph you are. The only downside is you don't have a direct access to Highway 401. You will have to take Highway 6, which will then take you to Highway 401 on either direction, depending on where you're heading to. Now, that's what the residents here do enjoy, and like I said, that's why it is actually a preferred choice over Kitchener and Cambridge or Waterloo region for that matter, because if you have business or family to deal with or visit often in the Toronto and suburbs, well, Guelph is definitely going to be a preferred choice because you're cutting down that extra 15-20 minutes commute each way by living in Guelph versus living further down in Waterloo region. Now, one of the major pros of living in Guelph, Ontario is the low crime rate and the overall safety this city has to offer. Guelph has actually consistently ranked as one of the top 10 safest cities, not just in Ontario, but in Canada. And as late as last few weeks in 2023, we are sitting about fall 2023. But just a few weeks ago, there was a recent data published on the crime index and overall safety, and Guelph ranked as the third safest city in Canada with the crime index well under 30 and the overall safety index of just under 7. Now, if you were to compare this with some of the other towns that many people do consider while looking at Guelph, such as Cambridge, Waterloo, Kitchener on further west, or if you were to go further east like Oshawa, Pickering, Ajax, all those towns on the east end, Guelph actually ranks far better in terms of the overall crime rate and the safety index in comparison to some of its peers. That's actually the reason why Guelph is a preferred choice for many families moving outside of the Toronto or from any part of Ontario or Canada. So if overall safety of the town is one of the main priorities for you and your family, well, I can tell you Guelph has to be one of the top on your list of the cities to consider. Now, one of the other benefits of living in Guelph, Ontario is the strong work economy that the city has to offer, along with the cost of living that's far more reasonable than one of the bigger towns such as Toronto. So when it comes to work economy, it's fascinating to know that the city of Guelph has an employment rate well over 67% with an unemployment rate just shy of 2%. And that speaks to the numbers. The numbers do speak by themselves. And when it comes to the cost of living, you're looking at 27% lower cost of living in comparison to towns like Toronto. So that's where actually, if you were to move from Toronto to Guelph, you will immediately put yourself into a positive cash flow situation, assuming that you're keeping your job in Toronto and commuting, which is the case with many people living in Guelph, where they do have to actually commute outside of the town to work for the work reasons, whether it's Toronto or further west in the Waterloo region. We'll talk about that. But this is one of the pros, but there is a flip side to it, which I'm going to cover in the later part of this video, so you do want to stick around. Now, one of the other advantages of living in Guelph is the access to education. Now, what I mean by that is, whether you have kids going to schools, there are some great schools which are ranked fairly high among some of the ranking bodies such as Fraser Institute, whether you have kids going to elementary, middle school, or for secondary school, you definitely have some great options within the city boundaries. Now, besides that, for higher education, as we know, we do have University of Guelph, which is very well known for some of its programs in food innovation and agriculture. Now, you might have kids pursuing education besides this field, but the benefit is living in Guelph, again coming back to that centrally located town where you could have kids going to Waterloo Region universities such as University of Waterloo or Wilfrid Laurier University, which would be about 30 to 35 minutes drive if they plan to drive during those university years. But nonetheless, it is definitely accessible even by public transit through Go Bus going from Guelph to one of these towns. So you definitely would have kids living with you if you prefer to do that, while being access to some of these education institutions within and around the town. Now, if you're a nature lover like myself, I can tell you, you will definitely fall in love with Guelph, Ontario, because this is the town that does offer plenty of green space in and around the town. There are parks, playgrounds, hiking trails scattered throughout this town. Guelph Lake Conservation Area is one of the local favorites with hectares and hectares of green space. Besides that, you have Speed River that's flowing throughout the town. There are lots of fishing spots throughout the town. So like I said, for outdoor enthusiasts, you will definitely have plenty of options. But there is a flip side to it, which I'm going to cover in the later part of this video as we head into the cons. So stick around. Now, one of the major cons of living in Guelph is the limited public transit accessibility. What I mean by that is getting around the town by public transit can be a challenge because it's not as accessible and it's not as frequent. So primarily it is a car-friendly town. However, even getting out of the town is just as much of a challenge. If you were to take a GO train, there is actually a GO train station in Guelph, but getting you to Union Station is going to be a couple hours, and there are only a couple trains that leaves, I believe, on a daily basis. So it's not as frequent and accessible as I mentioned earlier, even to get you to Waterloo, because apparently a lot of people living in Guelph do commute to Waterloo for work, and primarily they use the car to get them to Waterloo region. So there are definitely some improvements that can be done when it comes to the public transport network of Guelph. I mean, if you are primarily going to rely on car, this is not going to be a deal breaker for you. But if you are someone in your family is going to rely on public transit to get you, especially outside of the town, well, do keep in mind that it might take a while for you to get from one place to another. One of the other cons of living in Guelph, Ontario is the fact that it's pretty landlocked. And if you look it up in the map, even like it's inland, there's no major water body surrounding the town. And if I were to compare with some of the other towns around Guelph, I mean, not too far off, you have Mississauga, Burlington, Hamilton. On the other end, you have City of Toronto, for that matter, where you have immediate access to Lake Ontario and those gorgeous lakefronts. So if you're a fan of those, and if you're moving from one of those towns to Guelph, just keep in mind, you're not going to get access to those beautiful lakefronts. Well, you do have Speed River that's flowing through the town, and you have some, good riverfronts offering some great outdoor recreation options, but you have no lakefront as beautiful as some of those other towns that I just mentioned. So just keep that in mind. And to add to that further, Guelph is also one of those towns where the weather is not the friendliest always. And what I mean by that, I did actually pull up some data and I'll share with you. The fact that it is landlocked, the temperature are actually colder in winter than many parts of GTA and Toronto as well, especially those towns that I mentioned which are surrounded by those gorgeous lakefronts. Those lakes actually help you moderate the temperatures and the humidity, resulting in lower temperatures during the winter time and actually a little bit less snow. So unlike that, you're gonna definitely have a colder winter weather along with slightly higher than average snow living in Guelph, Ontario. So if you're a fan of snow and cold, well, that's good for you. But if you're not, that might be a deal breaker for you. And actually, as per one of the websites, on an average 160 days a year is when there is a higher chance of rain or snow in Guelph, Ontario, and temperatures rarely exceed 26 degrees Celsius, even during those summer months. On an average, there has been only 7 days a year where the temperature actually exceeds 30-degree mark in Guelph, Ontario. So like I said, the weather patterns are not as, good as you would like it to be, but hey, if you are a cold weather person, Guelph has to be a paradise for you. Now, one of the other things worth noting about Guelph is the fact that work economy is not as diverse. While it has one of the lowest unemployment rate and one of the highest employment rates, but many people living in Guelph do have to actually commute outside of the town to find work. So unless you are in one of those occupations which is primarily driving the city's economy, such as manufacturing, food innovation, there is some supply chain and logistics, you might have to, commute to a certain distance. People do commute primarily to either Waterloo or Toronto to find work living in Guelph. So just keep in mind that you may not be able to find work right away locally within the town. You might have to be prepared to commute to a certain distance if your field is other than what I mentioned. However, having said that, it's definitely changing the work landscape. It's definitely getting more diverse. But as we speak right now, it's not as diverse as we would like it to be. Now, one of the other things that people living in Guelph do experience is the growth in student population. And they're kind of getting concerned that, it might eventually turn into a smaller university town. Because year over year student population is on the rise, and especially on the weekends, if you are around that university area, you will find that a lot of activities are geared towards the student population, and that's a concern for many residents living in Guelph. Now, having said that, there are definitely pockets which are very quiet and suburban in nature, away from the hustle and bustle of the student population. But there is also a brain drain that's happening in the town. And what I mean by that is, if you will see, majority of the people who study in the University of Guelph are primarily, coming from outside of the town, outside of province in some case, and from outside of country in many cases as well. So a lot of the students, when they actually graduate, they do leave the town to find work elsewhere, better paying jobs, higher paying jobs outside of the town. As I earlier mentioned, the work economy in the city itself is not as diverse. So the city does kind of experience that brain drain when the students eventually graduate and leave the town. If you are a nightlife person, I can tell you this might be a deal breaker for you. Guelph is not as good and vibrant in terms of its nightlife, and nothing compared to Toronto downtown. I mean, especially I've helped a few people moving from one of those bigger towns like Toronto to Guelph, and that's one thing they've kind of missed out on significantly. There are definitely some nightclubs and pubs you can check out in the town of Guelph, but the quality and the caliber of those clubs is nothing as good as what you find in the downtown Toronto. And also worth noting that, considering it is a lot of student population, a lot of these pubs and the nightclubs are kind of geared towards attracting that student population. But that kind of what defines the nightlife. You do have definitely some great dining options. There are definitely things to do outdoors in Guelph. But when it comes to nightlife, well, it might be a disappointment if you are looking for something in comparison to Toronto. So there you have it, the pros and the cons of living in Guelph, Ontario. I hope you did get some value and have a better perspective about the good and the bad side of this great town. After all, if you are looking to move west of the Greater Toronto area, Guelph has to be on your radar, and definitely it's worth considering for all the pros that I mentioned earlier. But nonetheless, whether you're thinking of moving in 9 days or 9 days, be sure to reach out. All the info right below in the description. I'll be more than happy to help you make a smooth move to Kitchener and surrounding towns. Until next time, well, I do hope to show you around town.